Hey guys, welcome back to Release the Craftin. Purcell here with another edition of Storycraft. I hope you guys are having a wonderful time with these stories. I know that I am. And as always, if you have any requests for stories you would like to hear in this series, let me know in the comments down below. Now, you guys, the story I have for you today was a long time in the making. And I don't mean it took me a long time to get the research or learn about the story. I actually already knew it. And that's not a humble brag. It's just a brag because I'm not humble. I think we all kind of know it though, so cut me some slack. It's just that all day today when I wanted to record, I would start something freaking noisy and I had to wait until it was done. And this got worse the more into the evening it got. So the last thing I did was I printed out a bunch of digitals because I wanted to do like an Etsy shop update for you guys. And I had to wait for the printer to stop because I'm literally stationed right next to my printer. And then I was like, all right, great. And then I did dinner. And then I was like, all right, I'm going to shut it down, get ready to record this story. Guess who started the dishwasher? Right when they wanted to start telling the story. So while I waited for the dishwasher to finish, I maybe finished a bottle of wine. So this one's going to be extra spicy. I don't think so, because I'm telling the Peralt version, not the Basile version. We'll get into it, because I haven't even told you guys what story I'm telling. I am telling you guys the story of Sleeping Beauty. This was a request, so I am happy to tell it. There's a couple versions of this story. The Grimm's version is probably the most well-known. It's the one that most closely follows the Disney adaptation, although Disney says that they are influenced by the Peralt version, which is my preferred version of the story, so that's what we're going with today. There is another version that's older by somebody Basile. I don't remember his first name. Again, we're a wine bottle into this, so cut me some slack. I don't like Basile's version, so I'm not telling that version. I might touch on it at the end because it is irrelevant to the context of what we're doing here, so maybe I'll tell you guys, but it's an awful version and I hate it, so we're not doing that today. Today, I'm going to tell you the story. Our story, oh my god. Let me just take a deep breath. Our story begins in the way, way long ago, in a kingdom far, far away. Once upon a time, there were a king and a queen who had no children and wanted a child desperately to carry on, their legacy, the throne, royalty, those kind of things. And, they prayed and they prayed and they prayed, and finally one day they were blessed with a child. Of course, it was a girl child, but you'll take what you can get when you have nothing, right? So, as the queen is, pregnant, they're preparing this big, baby shower, baby welcoming, ceremony, and they start putting together their guest list. So, of course, they're inviting, the nobles and their ladies and the notable people in the kingdom, and they get down towards the bottom of the list, and they're like, all right, we're gonna invite, those 13 fairies that everybody invites to the christenings and their baby shower things. I don't know what they're called. I don't have children. Birthday parties, literal birthday parties. And the wife is like, oh, well, we could invite all 13 of those fairies, but looking at this guest list, we only have enough fancy golden plates, which is what we as royal people eat off of and feed our guests off of, for 12 of the fairies. And since no one's seen the last fairy, the 13th fairy, in 50 years, I don't even think that fairy is alive anymore. So we don't even need to invite her because we only have 12 more plates left, and we can't just feed her off the regular china. That would be embarrassing. And the king's like, you're right. And there's no way we could possibly commission another plate to be made. So let's just not invite that fairy, because she's probably dead. And I don't want to spend the money on a golden plate. I already have so many. And it's just, I got to put them all in the cabinet. Storage is an issue. No more extra plates. So they proceed to have their party. It's a big grand affair. Everyone is enjoying their dinners off their fancy gold plates. The 12 fairies show up. They're all excited. And then party crashers, guys. Maleficent, the last fairy, the 13th fairy who's probably dead but not actually, she shows up and she's like, hey, I heard you guys were having a party and nobody fucking invited me. Rude. Really rude of you. I get invited to everything and I just choose to not go. So how dare you not invite me? Which, like, side note, if you're that kind of person, don't be surprised when people stop inviting you. Um, I'm not surprised when people stop inviting me to things. Don't be that person. But also, maybe don't be the king and queen and cheap out on your gold plates. There's some lessons here. I don't know which one it is. Don't take my word for it. We're a bottle deep. So Maleficent then proceeds to tell them that they are all horrible people for not inviting her to this baby birthday party that she didn't want to go to in the first place, but she desperately wants to go to now when she heard that everybody was eating on gold plates. And surprise, surprise, there's not a plate for her. So she's like, you know what? This offense of not being allowed to go to an infant I've never met's birthday party for a king and queen I don't actually know personally, is the highest offense anyone has ever offended any person in the history of time. So for that, I'm going to curse you guys. In fact, I'm not going to curse you specifically. I'm going to curse your baby. When she hits 16 years old, she's going to prick her finger on the spindle of a spinning wheel. Words are really hard. And die. And everyone's like, wow, okay, that's extreme. Just because you didn't get a party invite? And she's like, yeah, absolutely, this is how I feel. Nobody doesn't invite me. I always get invited. So this seems like a fair and equal punishment to not being invited to a party. So she dips and everyone's like shook. And they're all trying to talk about what to do. And the 12 fairies are like, well, we were giving the princess gifts of like beauty and grace and a snatched little itty bitty waist. But I guess one of us can give up our gift, probably like the gift of smart decisions or financing, rulership sort of gift that we were thinking, something responsible. We'll give up that gift and we will use that gift to stop the curse. Now, we're not as powerful as the 13th fairy. You actually should have probably invited her because she's the strongest out of all of us. So the best thing that we can do is instead of it killing her, it'll just put her to sleep. That's the best option we have. And the king and queen are like, wow, sleep is the best option? Like, I know that, like, you guys have all given gifts already, except for this last one, but maybe you guys could work together as a team and then, like, maybe just counteract the curse that way. Like, take back all the other gifts and just counteract this one because it seems to be the most severe thing and I want our daughter to live. And they're like, no, absolutely not. We can't work together. We only give one gift. If we gave you guys another gift, that would be ridiculous. We'd have to give everybody 2 gifts. So we have one fairy who has 1 gift left. She's going to make it so that your daughter doesn't die, and that's the best we got for you. So then they're like, all right, we'll take what we can get because we don't want our kid to die. And that's what happens. The fairy does her magic, and then she stops the curse from killing Briar Rose. She has like 20 different names in every version. I'm going with Briar Rose because I like it the best. So they stop the curse from killing Briar Rose when she turned 16. And in the meantime, our King Stefan is like, all right, I'm going to take an equally extreme measure, and I'm going to yeet all of the spinning wheels right out of the kingdom. Nobody can spin anymore. We'll just import all of our threads and fabrics because my baby needs to live. And this sleeping thing, I know they said sleep. It doesn't sound like a foolproof plan to me. I really would have felt more confident in this if 12 fairies had worked together, but apparently that's against the rules and they don't have to give 2 gifts from here on out. So, you know what? I get it. I don't want to have to bring 2 gifts to parties when I go. So fair. But get rid of all your spinning wheels. Also, everyone whose trade is spinning yarn and thread, like, get the fuck out because throwing out your livelihood, so you might as well move with it. And that's what happens. They get rid of all of the spinning wheels in the kingdom. And time goes by, and Briar Rose is having a fantastic life, a fantastic childhood of excellent, extreme privilege. And, she puts all those beauty, grace gifts to work to have, a fantastic life where everyone treats her really well. And then it turns out that she is about to turn 16. It is the day of her 16th birthday, and she's just strolling the castle grounds, waiting for the party to start, as you do. And she looks over the wall, and she sees this old woman who's out there spinning on a spinning wheel, and she's like, what the heck is that? Because she's never seen one before, you guys. So she's like, whoa, that thing is crazy. This is medieval times. This is the highlight of entertainment for me. I need to know. I must know what that peculiar device is and how it works. So she sneaks over the wall, and she's like, hey, lady, what are you doing? Show it to me. And the woman kind of explains like, oh, I'm just spinning this into thread. And she's like, wow, crazy. That looks super fun. Can I try it? And the lady's like, yeah, of course. So the lady lets her try it. And in some sources, the lady is the fairy making the curse happen. In this source, it's just a random lady who's like spinning in front of the castle for no reason, because she clearly didn't hear about this whole curse, and they never talked about it outside of the kingdom, I guess. So people coming in didn't know that there was like this embargo on spinning wheels. So she gets about to spinning, having a grand old time, and then what happens? She pricks her finger on the freaking spindle, and she falls down dead. Well, not really dead, asleep, but asleep like she's dead. And everyone panics. That lady grabs her wheel and uses a sudden Herculean strength to take off running, because she doesn't want to be there when the guards find out that the princess just dropped dead, and she's got this spinning wheel hanging out there right next to the princess. Not a good look. So she dips, and they find the princess out there. They're like, oh my god, the curse has come true. She sleeps, but she seems to be dead. What do we do? And in all this panic, the king is trying to figure out what to do. How can we undo this? My poor baby daughter. They send a messenger out to the fairies to be like, hey, it happened. The thing that we all knew was coming and nobody prevented or prepared for or watched her to keep from happening. Yeah, it happened. So just wanted to give you guys a heads up. And one of the fairies, Merryweather, is like, you know what? I'm going to put everybody in the castle to sleep, so that this way, when the curse is finally broken and the princess is awoken, she can awake to familiar faces, because F the rest of your guys' lives, that's why. So she heads over to the castle, she puts the entire palace to sleep. I guess everyone who lived outside of the palace wasn't concerned. This is like a Beauty and the Beast situation where we don't know what the people outside of the castle actually thought about what was happening. But you had to think husbands and wives were just locked in this castle, asleep and cursed forever. And their family's like, well, we live in fairy tale land. That's just what fucking happens here. So they put everybody to sleep, and then they cast a spell on the plants around the castle walls, which happen to be roses, in honor of the daughter, Briar Rose, to grow to form this huge barrier to keep the princess safe until the curse can be broken. I don't know why, because you think the fairies know how this curse gets broken, but they're like, nah, we're gonna make it really difficult. So this goes on for some time. The castle is enshrouded in these vines and these thorns. The roses die out because it's cursed there, so nothing can bloom in this place. And people hear hey, the princess fell asleep. I'm a prince. I want to go there, figure out if I can save her, because if I can save her, then I can marry her and I can be the king of that place. So there, all these guys, all these knights, these princes, they start running over there, trying to see if they can get into the castle to save the beautiful princess and become kings themselves. And they end up all being caught up in the thorns that seem to have evolved a mind of their own, maybe just drunk off the magic that was used there. I don't know, because it seems like a counterintuitive defense mechanism, but maybe the fairies put it in there. They were like, no, we already know it's got to be one specific bro, and none of you guys are it, so we're locking it down. So all these guys are trying to get in to see the princess. They're getting caught up in the thorns, and then they are dying there because they can't escape. And this goes on for a while until people start to forget that there's a sleeping princess and an entire kingdom, like, asleep there. And it actually goes on for 100 years, which is the length of this curse as expected. I don't think I mentioned that, but they expected it would be 100 years of sleep. So it goes on for 100 years to the day. And there is a prince from another kingdom riding by with his hunting party, and he looks over at this great wall of thorns, and one of his guys in the party is like, yeah, that's actually, there's a legend about how there's a princess asleep in there, and, all she needs is true love's kiss to wake her up. And the prince is like, I bet that could be me. So he, decides to approach this, and the guys are like, whoa, 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 everybody who goes in there dies. Look at all the thorns. Like, that's not a place to be. And he's like, no, like, how can I be afraid of this place? It's full of roses. So the thorny branches had finally bloomed because the curse was done. It had been 100 years. So they finally bloomed, and the prince, manages to stroll through this thorny, rosy graveyard, because remember, there's bodies of people, probably bones by this point, but, they're there, just hanging out in the vines, and he's like, wow, this isn't ominous or concerning at all. I'm going to continue to ride my horse through this. And he does that. He goes all the way up to the castle, wanders through the place, probably, lays in some beds, touches some people who are asleep, has a whole Goldilocks in the castle situation going. And he finally makes it to the room that Briar Rose is in, and he is wowed, absolutely awestruck by how beautiful she is. She's radiant, even asleep in this dusty, musty room, probably with 1,000 spiders, because that's what happens in these places, but they never mention it in the story. So he walks up to her, and he's like, oh my god, this girl is so freaking pretty. I'm just going to give her a kiss, see what happens. So that's what he does. He bends down to kiss her, and she's actually already awake because the curse was over. She didn't actually need true love's kiss. She's awake on her own, but the kiss does sort of rouse her back to life, so to speak. And she pops up and starts talking. And you guys, this is I haven't spoke to anybody all weekend, so the first person I talk to is going to be absolutely barraged with everything I have to tell them, all my thoughts and feelings from an entire weekend, but 100 years worth. And she just starts talking and talking and talking. And while she's talking, everybody else in the castle starts to wake up. The thorny vines start to recede. The sun comes through. The magic sort of cleans up the place, because I'm not making the housekeepers do that in my version. And everybody's like, whoa, oh my god, what a great nap we had. Also, we're fucking starving. So they get right to work, doing a feast. Nobody goes to check on the princess. They don't even care, because they are so freaking hungry. They're like, let's have a big party. The curse is broken. We're finally awake. I have this horrible crick in my neck that only, a rager can solve. And they set about to work, and the princess is still talking. And she talks for 4 hours straight, you guys. And not, there wasn't a single point where the prince regrets his decisions, which I'm going to call cap. I bet you he did within the first 30 minutes when he realized he wasn't going to get a word in edgewise. But he's so hard up for this girl that he's like, oh my god, even though you just talked to me for 4 hours nonstop, I am in love with you. Everything you say is so interesting and so fascinating. I could listen to you talk forever. This is better than any Audible book I have ever had, any sleep meditation. You are amazing. Your voice is lyrical. And she's like, wow, because you feel so strongly, I also feel so strongly. And I'm in love with you as well. And they're like, great. So they go to see what all the commotion in the castle is about, because they're both very aware that everybody's down there having this huge party, this huge feast. And when they get down there, they're like, hey, come join the party. And they're like, great, we're in love. And then the chaplain's like, cool, you guys are married. So they marry them instantly on the spot. So this we're waking up welcome back party is now a wedding party. And they have this huge party, and the prince is so besotted with Briar Rose that he's like, I'm gonna stay here for a couple of days. And he does. He hangs out for a couple of days. But then, the wedding sort of dies down, the party starts to die down, everyone starts to get back to their life as normal and pick up the pieces, and you think the story's over and they live happily ever after. It doesn't end here, because the prince is like, actually, I need to go home, but I'll come back. So he does. He goes home, tells his parents that he had, an extended hunting trip and is going to go again because he's after some exciting game. They're like, great, have fun, my boy. And he comes back. And he does this a couple of times where he just goes back and forth between his kingdom and Briar Rose's, and he'll spend some time with her. He'll spend some time at home, and he just does this for a while. And you're like, why doesn't he say anything? Well, I'll tell you why. Because his mother is an ogre. And he knows that ogres love to eat people, specifically children. And by this point, Briar Rose is pregnant. So he's like, I'm just not going to say anything. And my parents will never ask any questions about why I'm continuously taking these like week-long vacations away from the house and only coming home for like a day or two. It won't be suspicious at all. I'm a smart guy. This is a great plan. And the king, his father, has no questions. No questions about the fact that his wife is an ogre. He was like, I married for money. What can you do? I don't even care. No questions about where his son is going. But the queen, the ogre, is like, do you think I'm dumb? Like, do you think I, the ogre queen, am dumb? I know what's going on here. So she sends one of her servants to follow the prince and see where he's going. And sure enough, the servant follows the prince to Briar Rose's castle and sees that he is in fact carrying on this relationship with this woman who has now had twins. And he's like, oh, well, let me go tell my lady. So he runs back home, tells the ogre queen, hey, your son has a wife and they have 2 children. And she's like, cool, take this letter to the wife after my son leaves. So, the servant follows the son back out there, waits until the son gets done with his little tete-a-tete rendezvous, and when the son leaves, he's like, hey, this is actually a letter from the prince. And Briar Rose reads it, and she's like, oh, he wants me to send my children to his kingdom so they can meet his parents before we make our formal introductions. And she's like, great, no questions, this seems like a safe idea. I don't need to go because he only said only the children. That's not suspicious whatsoever. You think, I would be involved in the introductions, but I've been asleep way too long to ask questions. I'm a doer now. So she sends her kids with the servant back to the castle, and the servant takes them directly to the queen, who's like, cool, these are my grandchildren. I happen to love children with a nice Chianti. And she tells the cook, hey, take these 2 little kids, cook them up for me in 100 different sauces. And the cook is like, that's a very specific request. Okay, kids, let's go. So he takes the kids down to the kitchen, but he can't bring himself to cook the children. So he's like, okay, I'm going to run you guys over to my house in the woods. You're going to stay with my wife, and I'm going to slaughter these 2 lambs and cook them with 100 different sauces. What a specific and strange request. And I'm going to serve them to the queen. And that's what he does. And the queen is like, wow, these sauces are top notch. I love to dip my food. And she is so besotted with her meal and the experience of having 100 different sauces to choose from that she doesn't know she's not eating children. And she's like, cool, well, that was a small scant meal. Children have less meat than I thought. Go ahead and send for Briar Rose. Have her come because I'll eat her next. So the servant goes, fetches up Briar Rose, who, upon meeting the queen, immediately understands what's happened there with very little context, which is like a level of galaxy brain that I wish I possessed, because she looks around, she sees the queen as an ogre, she's like, oh crap, my prince isn't here, the king isn't here, it's just me and this ogre queen, which means my children are dead and I am next. So the same thing happens. The ogre queen tells the cook, hey, cook this girl and bring me 100 different sauces. In fact, make it 101. I want there to be a unique experience this time. So the cook takes her down to the kitchen and he's like, man, I don't know what I could use to replace you because you're an adult and no one will ever believe that you are a lamb. You're way too big to be a lamb, so I need more meat than that. And there's no other animal in the entire world that could have more meat than a lamb to cover all the ground that I'm going to need to because you're so much bigger. You're an adult woman. Not like a regular sheep would do the trick. So the cook starts to sweat a little bit and he's like, I might actually have to cook you. So he gets a big fire started and puts a big pot of water on there and she's like, okay, yeah, you could cook me. You could. It's just, I'm wearing such lovely clothes and they're going to be really heavy and they're not even going to be tasty. They're going to get ruined in the water. So why don't you make a gift of my clothes to the queen and I'll just take them off for you and jump in that pot and that'll be the easiest thing to do. And the cook's like, okay. I hadn't considered that part of the equation because I was a little bit stressed about what could possibly replace a woman of your size. So that's what Briar Rose does. She starts taking off articles of her clothing one by one, but every time she takes off a piece of clothing, she screams. Like bloody murder horror movie screams. And the cook has no concerns. He's just like, all right, that's a weird thing you're doing. Strange. But what happens is while she's taking off all these individual articles of clothing and screaming, the prince is like, what the heck is going on downstairs? So he goes downstairs to see what all the noise is about in the kitchens. And when he gets there, he sees his wife, Briar Rose, bare ass naked, screaming in the kitchen with the cook who's got a big pot big enough for her to be boiled in, just going on the stove. And he's like, well, this is concerning. So when he starts to grill the cook about what's going on, the cook reveals everything except for one key thing, which is the location of the children. So he's just like, hey, the queen made me do this. The servant went and got your wife. I don't know. Like, I didn't want to be part of this, but here's the situation. She screams every time she takes off an article of clothing. And that's a weird, concerning habit. I don't know if you should maybe look into that or get her some therapy for it. It seems like there's some trauma there. And the prince is like, there's no trauma. My wife is just the smarty person to have ever smarted. All those years of sleep made her really, really intelligent. So the prince goes, he arrests the cook, he arrests the servant, and they arrest the queen. And they're all sentenced to death for their part in this plot. The king apparently doesn't care. He's like, all right, do what you got to do. I married an ogre. I kind of knew what I was getting into. So there they are. So they execute the queen. Then they execute the servant. And on the day that they're going to execute the cook's like, well, don't actually kill me, though, because I actually have your children in my house in the woods. And then they're like, what? Say that sentence again and then tell us where the good part is. And then the cook's like, no, come to my house. I will show you. So they go to his house in the woods, see that the children are alive and being well taken care of by the cook's wife. So the cook is spared because, he admitted that he could not bring himself to murder the children, although he was strangely comfortable with murdering Briar Rose. That never comes up again. And so finally, the prince and Briar Rose are reunited with their children. All is well. The prince finally tells his dad what was going on and how this whole situation came to be. And his dad's like, strange. I didn't really care because I'm sort of checked out. I've been married to an ogre for like 20 years. I'm not emotionally here, but I feel like you could have just said that from the get-go and I may have done something as the king of this land to protect your child and your wife, like your children and your wife. And the prince is like, no, communication has never solved any problem. That's silly. And then they laughed and they lived happily ever after. The king became the king. The prince became the king. Briar Rose became the queen. They joined their two kingdoms, which are full of some very no longer sleepy people and some people who were like, wait, you went to that cursed place and brought back a woman? we have some notes, but it never came up again. And they let it go. And they lived happily ever after. And that, my friends, is the story of Snow White, not Snow White. Sleeping Beauty. I need to do Snow White next. It's right here on my notes. Yeah, and that's my story. I hope you guys enjoyed that version. I particularly enjoy it. It is based off of Perrault's version, although I did take a little bit from some other sources. I guess because I brought it up in the beginning, I will mention here that in Basile's version, when Briar Rose falls asleep, like the first half happens the same, but when Briar Rose falls asleep, the king is so like upset that his daughter is seemingly dead that he's like, let's move. And they move the entire castle. Everybody leaves and they just leave her in the old castle and they move their kingdom someplace else to start over without the daughter because he can't bear to possibly be in the same place as her. The only problem is that this time a king, not a prince, is riding by and starts to wander this empty, deserted castle, only to see that there's this sleeping miner, and then assaults her because he can't help himself. She's so freaking beautiful, and all the excuses men give in the world. Content warning, content warning, content warning. I know that should have come first. I've had some wine. Cut me some slack. And then she gets pregnant, gives birth, does not wake up from the curse. Because in this version, instead of pricking her finger on the spinning wheel, she has a little piece of flax get underneath her fingernail. So the fairies come to help her out and make sure that the children that she birthed in her coma are getting fed. You know, they make sure the children make it to the nipple for the breastfeeding. And I guess one day they were late for this daily feeding, and one of the babies starts to suckle on her finger, thereby removing the little piece of flax from beneath her nail. And she wakes up and she's like, what the heck is this? These are two little babies that I don't know where they came from. And it takes her a little bit to like come to the conclusion that they're hers. And then the king comes back and he's like, man, I just remembered about you, the sleeping girl in the woods, but now you're awake and those children are mine. That's amazing. I'm going to move you here to this wonderful little cottage and I'm going to just take care of you and see you when I feel like it. Because in this version, the king is actually already married. Yeah. So the guy is married, found a sleeping miner in the woods and decided to have his way with her. And then is like, okay, well now you're my mistress. So I'm going to put you in this little special mistress hut. And I'm not going to tell my wife about this. And actually, he's really mean to his wife because they don't have any children. And he's like, that's your fault. So at this point, I'm like, oh man, I kind of sympathize with the wife, except for sort of the same thing happens where she finds out about his mistress and she's like, oh, bring me the children. I'm going to fucking serve them to him to eat. So she kind of pulls like an Arya Stark here where she's like, I'm going to feed him his own children. Except the cook, again, is like, I really can't get behind killing kids. So cooks up some lambs. They serve it to the king. The whole time she's like, you're eating exactly what's yours. Ha 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 ha. And eventually the king's like, bro, what's wrong with you? And sort of shuts her down a little bit. So then she's like, well, I'm not to be defeated by your lack of care for what I'm saying and the fact that you couldn't pick up what I was putting down. So she sends for Briar Rose to be eaten, and sort of the same course of events. This time the king shows up, is like, hey, don't cook my wife, and then executes everybody but the cook. Same story, same happily ever after. He ends up marrying his 16-year-old mistress, and nobody questions the validity of the relationship ever again. Happily ever after? Question mark, question mark, question mark. Yeah, I don't support that version. That version is trash, and I'm glad that it got replaced as time went by for the versions that we know today, and the story continues to be retold. Which I love in the course of fairy tales, because yeah, we don't support that version. Basile is on something, like that's an awful version. But yeah, that is a little bit about Sleeping Beauty and the versions we don't talk about after this point in time. And then, you know, of course you guys know this, the Disney animation one, and there was another one I wanted to tell you guys about, but I don't remember. Although I did realize while I was researching this story, because I was also parallel researching Snow White, because somebody else asked me for that, is that their stories are kind of similar, even though like the journey there is different. They both end up coma princesses, and I was like, wow, what a weird club they could start. But if you guys have made it to the end of this video, I appreciate your faces. Hope you enjoyed the tale, and if you did, let me know in the comments below. And again, if you have any requests, let me know those as well. Because your requests will keep this series running, and I am really enjoying this series, so I hope it continues to run. And I'm lying. I would continue to do it even if I didn't have any requests, because I really enjoy doing this series. And I hope you guys are enjoying it as well. So I'm going to leave now because I don't know how to end these properly. And I will catch you all in the next one. Again, I appreciate your faces. Have a lovely day. Goodbye.